The winds howled across the barren, arid surface of the planet, a desolate world far from the reaches of civilization. The planet was an untouched wilderness, its surface a stark canvas of dust, jagged rocks, and a pale, cold sky. The stars hung like distant memories, glistening faintly in the sky as two figures worked tirelessly under the weight of isolation. These were the pioneers, the visionaries who had set foot on this forsaken world with one purpose: to build a new home for humanity. It was a task that many had doubted, a task that had consumed their every thought, their every moment. But for scientists Sarah Langford and Marcus Hayes, it was not just about the future of their species. It was about something far more profound: the future of their own connection to this world and to each other. They had arrived on the planet years ago, part of an ambitious project spearheaded by the Earth Federation. It was a world that had been identified for its potential, its resources, and its proximity to a nearby star that could sustain human life. The mission was a monumental one: to terraform the planet, to transform it from a hostile, barren wasteland into a thriving world capable of supporting human colonies. The work was incredibly complex. Scientists, engineers, and workers from across humanity had been sent to this remote location, each with a specific role to play in the grand, interstellar plan. But, for all the collaborative effort, Sarah and Marcus found themselves alone for the most part, together on this vast, inhospitable rock. The journey to the planet had been long, months of travel aboard the Endurance, the ship that had carried them and a small group of others to their new home. Once they arrived, the isolation had become their daily reality. The rest of the crew had moved on to other duties or left to return to Earth, leaving Sarah and Marcus to continue the work that was so critical to humanity's future. Together, they made up the backbone of the scientific team: Sarah, a leading expert in environmental science and biology, and Marcus, an engineer who specialized in terraforming technologies and resource management. Despite the monumental task ahead of them, there had been no grand welcoming ceremony, no overwhelming celebration. It was simply the two of them, the desolate planet stretching out in every direction, and the boundless challenge of creating life in a place that had none. The planet, named Zora 4, had once been considered a hostile and uninhabitable place, a world where human life would have been impossible without drastic intervention. But Sarah and Marcus had the skills, the knowledge, and the drive to make it possible. At first, their days were filled with technical problems and scientific experiments. They spent long hours in the makeshift lab, analyzing soil samples, studying atmospheric patterns, and deploying drones to monitor the planet's resources. The physical demands were great, and there were times when the work seemed endless. But there was also a deep sense of purpose. Each breakthrough, each step toward their goal felt like a small victory in the larger struggle to make Zora for a habitable world. The soil, once barren and acidic, began to show signs of life after the introduction of engineered microbes. The atmosphere, once toxic and unbreathable, started to thin and stabilize after a series of atmospheric processors were deployed. Slowly, but surely, they were turning the planet into a world capable of sustaining human life. The work was hard, grueling, and often lonely. The days bled into one another in an endless cycle of science and labor. Sarah and Marcus were often the only two people on the planet's surface for days at a time, working in tandem to ensure that the projects they had started continued moving forward. It was in this silence, amidst the quiet hum of machinery and the distant howl of the winds, that something began to change between them. At first, the connection was subtle: an occasional glance over a computer screen, a shared moment of exhaustion, a brief conversation about the challenges of their work. But over time, it became clear that there was something deeper growing between them. It wasn't just the shared struggle or the camaraderie of working toward a common goal. It was something more personal, something that neither of them had expected to find in such an unlikely place. Sarah was the first to notice it. She had always been focused, dedicated to her work. She had trained for years to be part of this mission, and she had never allowed herself to become distracted by anything that might pull her attention away from the task at hand. But when she looked at Marcus, when she saw the way he smiled after a particularly difficult breakthrough or the way his eyes softened when they worked together on a particularly difficult problem, she couldn't deny that something had shifted. There was a bond between them that went beyond their professional relationship, a quiet understanding, an unspoken connection that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. For Marcus, the feeling was equally undeniable. When they first arrived on Zora 4, he had seen Sarah as just another colleague, another brilliant scientist with whom he would work closely. But over time, something had changed. He had found himself looking forward to their time together, to their late-night conversations and shared moments of quiet. It wasn't just the work that had drawn him in. It was the way Sarah approached everything with such passion and dedication, the way she could make even the most mundane tasks seem meaningful. And it was the way she looked at him, with a warmth in her eyes that he had never seen in anyone before. It made him feel alive in a way he hadn't known he needed. There was a night, some months into their work, when their connection truly solidified. They had spent the day working on a particularly difficult project, a set of geothermal converters designed to tap into the planet's natural heat and use it to warm the atmosphere. The project had been a monumental task, one that required precision and careful calibration. By the time the workday ended, both of them were exhausted. They made their way back to the small outpost they called home, an isolated structure that housed their lab, living quarters, and all the technology they needed to sustain their work. As they sat down for a quiet meal together, the silence between them felt different. There was no rush, no urgency to speak. They simply sat there, eating their ration packs and watching the faint light of distant stars filtering through the small windows of the outpost. And then, as if prompted by the very air around them, Sarah spoke. "You know," she began, her voice softer than usual, "I didn't think I'd find something like this here. Not on a planet like this. I thought I'd be focused on the science, on the mission." But she trailed off, looking down at her food, her fingers absently tracing the edge of her plate. "But I'm starting to feel like we're building something more than just a world here." Marcus looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had known, of course, that something was happening between them. But hearing Sarah speak so openly about it brought a wave of clarity. "I know what you mean," he said quietly. "I thought this was going to be all about the work, about terraforming, about making the planet livable. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like just a project. It started to feel like we're doing something bigger. Like we're building something for ourselves, not just for humanity." They shared a look then, a quiet understanding passing between them. It was as though, in that moment, the weight of their isolation, the vastness of the planet surrounding them, faded into the background. All that remained was the connection they shared, the deep, undeniable bond that had formed between them. From that moment on, their relationship changed. The work continued, of course. There were still miles of barren land to be transformed, still countless scientific obstacles to overcome. But now, the work felt different. It was not just about survival, it was about creating something together, something that belonged to them. As they planted trees in the newly formed soil, as they engineered the first sustainable habitats, as they watched the sky above slowly begin to change from a pale gray to a vibrant blue, they realized that they were no longer just scientists working toward a common goal. They were partners in every sense of the word, united not just by their mission but by the deep, emotional connection they had forged together. Their bond grew stronger as the months passed, and with each new achievement, each new step toward making Zora for a viable world, they found themselves increasingly entwined. The long days and nights spent together on the desolate planet had transformed into a journey of discovery, not just of the planet, but of each other. Sarah and Marcus had come to realize that, in building a new world for humanity, they were also building something incredibly personal, a love that had blossomed amid the harshest of conditions. But even as their relationship deepened, they both knew that their time on Zora 4 was limited. The mission was a long one, and they had committed to seeing it through, but eventually, others would come. New teams of colonists and scientists would arrive, and the quiet, intimate life they had built would be replaced by the bustle of a growing community. But as they stood together on the surface of Zora 4, looking out over the vast landscape they had helped shape, Sarah and Marcus knew that what they had created, both the new world and their relationship, was something that could never be taken away. They had built a home, a sanctuary, a world for humanity. But they had also built something even more precious, a bond that would endure long after their work was done. A connection that, like the planet they had transformed, would grow, evolve, and thrive. Together, they had created a new world for their species, and in doing so, had created a world for themselves, a world of love, of partnership, and of shared dreams. In the silent, desolate expanse of space, Sarah and Marcus had found something unexpected, a future, not just for humanity, but for themselves, together. And in the quiet of the vast, empty planet they had helped to build, they knew that they had created something that no one could ever take away. A love that would last, no matter how far they traveled or how much time passed. It was their own world now, one they had built from the dust of a barren planet, and one that would live on in their hearts forever.